What if the school bully picked the wrong girl, one with a connection so powerful it could change everything? This inspirational story follows Maya Williams, a quiet new student who becomes the target of Bryce Carter, the most feared guy in school. He thinks she's weak, an easy victim. But what he doesn't know is that Maya has a secret, one that will turn the tables in the most unexpected way. Stay until the end, because what begins with a bully's arrogance will end with his downfall. Maya Williams stepped off the bus, gripping the straps of her backpack as she stared up at the massive front entrance of Clearview High School in Houston, Texas. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of freshly cut grass, blending with the warmth of pavement still holding onto the lingering summer heat. Students clustered in groups, laughter and casual chatter filling the space around her. But Maya felt like an outsider. This wasn't new. In fact, this was her fourth school transfer in just 3 years. Some kids moved because their parents got new jobs. Maya moved because she needed yet another fresh start. She kept her head down as she walked toward the main doors, hoping to blend in. A few students turned their heads, curious about the new girl, but she avoided their eyes. Clearview. High wasn't particularly special. A large suburban school filled mostly with middle-class kids who had known each other since kindergarten. The football team was decent. The cheer squad was popular, and the social hierarchy had been cemented long before Maya's arrival. None of it mattered to her. She had one goal: stay invisible. Inside, the hallway buzzed with energy. Lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked against the tile floors, and teachers tried to herd students into classrooms before the first bell. Maya clutched her schedule tighter. She was used to this routine. Find her locker, figure out where she'd sit at lunch, and most importantly, identify the kids she needed to avoid. That was when she saw him. Bryce Carter. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an effortless confidence that only the most popular and untouchable guys in high school carried. He leaned against a row of lockers, surrounded by a pack of boys in Letterman jackets, each one laughing too hard at something he'd just said. Even from a distance, Maya could see his aura of control, the kind that made people either follow him or fear him. She knew his type. Bryce was the golden boy. Star quarterback, wealthy family, good looks. But Maya noticed something else, the way people around him shifted nervously, the way their laughter sounded forced. She had met kids like Bryce before, the ones who thrived on power and intimidation. She had no plans of drawing his attention, but fate had other ideas. As she walked past, someone bumped into her shoulder. It wasn't an accident. Her books tumbled to the ground, scattering across the hallway. A few students stopped to watch, some snickering. Maya bent down quickly, ignoring the burn in her cheeks. Well, what do we have here? Maya froze. She didn't need to look up to know whose voice it was. Bryce Carter. His voice was calm, almost amused, but with an edge, like a lion toying with prey. Behind him, his friends chuckled. Slowly, Maya lifted her eyes. Bryce stood over her, arms crossed, that infuriating smirk spread across his face. "I don't think I've seen you before," he said. "You knew?" Maya didn't answer. She simply gathered her books, stood up, and brushed past him without a word. But Bryce wasn't done. "Hey, where are your manners?" he called out, his voice echoing down the hall. "I asked you a question." Maya kept walking. She'd played this game before. The best way to deal with guys like him was to not engage. But Bryce didn't like being ignored. Suddenly, she felt a sharp tug on her backpack, pulling her back just enough to stop her in her tracks. Not enough to hurt, but enough to prove he wasn't letting this go. Maya stopped. Slowly, she turned. For a moment, the hallway went silent. Even students who hadn't been watching before began to pay attention. She met Bryce's gaze. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe even surprise. You shouldn't have done that, Maya said quietly. Bryce raised an eyebrow, then let out a mocking laugh. And why's that? He smirked. Maya didn't answer. She just held his gaze unflinching. You're kind of weird, you know that? He said, tilting his head. His friends chuckled. Maya turned back around and walked away. She didn't need to look back to know Bryce wasn't finished with her, and he had no idea what kind of mistake he had just made. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Maya sat quietly in the back of classrooms, answering only when necessary. She ate lunch alone, tucked in a corner of the cafeteria where she could watch without being watched. Bryce and his friends dominated the center table, talking loudly, laughing like they owned the place. Every once in a while, Maya felt his eyes flicker toward her, but he didn't approach. Not yet. By the end of the day, Maya was relieved to finally escape. The Houston sun still beat down hard, making the pavement shimmer as she walked toward the bus stop. Just as she reached for her phone, a voice called from behind. Hey, new girl. She turned. Bryce stood there, hands in his pockets, that same cocky grin plastered across his face. A few of his friends lingered behind him, waiting. Maya sighed. What do you want? Bryce took a slow step forward, smirk widening. You've got an attitude problem, you know that? Maya didn't respond. What? You think you're better than me? He teased. This time, Maya let out a short laugh. Not nervous, not scared, just amused. And that more than anything caught Bryce off guard. I think, she said slowly, that you should walk away. Bryce's grin faltered for half a second before he recovered. Oh yeah? He took another step closer, towering over her. And why is that? Maya leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. Because you have no idea who I am. Bryce chuckled, shaking his head. And who are you exactly? Maya didn't answer. Instead, she took a step back, lifted her phone, and pressed a single button on her screen. A loud, roaring engine filled the air. A black Dodge Charger Hellcat pulled up to the curb, the kind of car that made heads turn. The tinted window rolled down slowly, and there he was. Vin Diesel. Bryce's smirk vanished. Maya turned back to him, smiling for the first time that day. Still think I'm weird? She asked. Bryce didn't answer. For the first time in his life, he was the one feeling small. Maya watched as his confident smirk disappeared. His jaw clenched, his eyes flickering between her and the unmistakable figure in the driver's seat. The air felt heavy. The once playful arrogance in his stance stiffened into unease. He took a half step back. His friends exchanged nervous glances, none of them daring to speak. Maya, on the other hand, took her time. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, exhaling slowly, as if she hadn't just flipped the power dynamic of the entire hallway. Vin Diesel didn't say a word at first. He just sat there, one hand on the wheel, his gaze fixed on Bryce. A look that carried weight, one that didn't need words to send a message. Bryce swallowed hard. Wait a second, he muttered under his breath, almost like he was trying to convince himself this wasn't real. His voice, usually so cocky, now carried an edge of uncertainty. He looked at Maya again, this time really looking, like he was piecing together something that should have been obvious from the start. Maya leaned just close enough for him to hear, her voice steady and low. Still think I'm just some random girl? Bryce's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed again. His mouth opened, then closed. No words coming out. Finally, Vin spoke. Get in, kid, he said, calm but firm. It wasn't a question. Maya didn't hesitate. She walked past Bryce, past the stunned silence of the crowd, and pulled open the passenger door. The moment she slid inside, Vin shifted the car into gear. The Charger let out a deep growl as it pulled away from the curb, leaving behind a hallway full of whispers and widened eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city of Houston blurred past the windows, the late afternoon sun casting streaks of orange and gold across the dashboard. Maya drummed her fingers lightly against her knee, finally letting out the tension she had carried since stepping onto that campus. Vin kept his eyes on the road, fingers tapping the steering wheel. "You okay?" Maya gave a short nod. Then, after a pause, she let out a small laugh. "That was kind of dramatic, wasn't it?" Vin smirked, his signature half-smile, creeping onto his face. "A little?" She shook her head, looking out the window. "I didn't mean for them to find out like that." Vin glanced at her. "And what would have been a better way? Letting some punk like that walk all over you?" Maya sighed, resting her head back against the seat. "I wasn't going to let him walk all over me. I was just waiting." Vin raised an eyebrow. "For what?" She shrugged. "For the right moment." Vin was quiet for a beat, then chuckled softly. "You sound like me when I was your age." Maya turned to him, a smirk tugging at her lips. "That's a scary thought." Vin laughed, shaking his head. "Smartass." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the tension fading into the rhythm of their banter. But Maya knew the problem wasn't gone. Bryce Carter wasn't the type to let things go, and even if he had been scared in that moment, fear had a funny way of turning into anger. When they pulled into the driveway of their sleek modern home in a quiet Houston suburb, Maya unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't get out right away, Vinny noticed. "Something else on your mind?" Maya hesitated, then exhaled. "He's not done with me." Vin studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "No, but you're not done with him either." Maya met his gaze. "You think I should fight back?" Vin leaned back, resting his arm on the wheel. "I think you need to be ready, because guys like him, they don't like losing." Maya pressed her lips together, thinking. Then she nodded. "Yeah, I know." And the group of jocks laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Maya straightened, fixing her tray. She didn't react, which only seemed to irritate them more. "What? No comeback, princess?" Ryan grinned. Maya exhaled sharply, barely holding back her smirk. "I just didn't realize cavemen still existed." The surrounding students let out a collective, "Ooh!" and Ryan's smile faltered. Bryce, who had been watching the whole thing, tilted his head slightly as if trying to figure out his next move. Maya didn't wait for them to come up with one. She walked past, sat down at her table, and started eating like nothing had happened. But she knew better. Bryce wasn't going to let this go. By the time the last bell rang, she was already prepared for something to happen. So when she found her locker completely trashed, books dumped onto the floor, marker scribbles all over the metal, she wasn't surprised. She sighed, leaning against the adjacent locker. A few students stood nearby, watching, none of them brave enough to step in, but all of them invested enough to see what she would do. Maya bent down, picking up her books one by one, stacking them neatly. Her hands didn't shake. Her expression didn't waver. She could feel Bryce watching from across the hallway, waiting, so she gave him nothing. She stood, shut her locker, and walked away without a word. That, more than anything, seemed to unnerve him. That night at home, Maya sat at the kitchen table, tapping her fingers against the wooden surface, while Vin Diesel leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her closely. "They trashed my locker today," she said finally. Vin raised an eyebrow. "That's their best move?" Maya smirked. "For now." Vin nodded slowly. "So what's yours?" Maya was quiet for a moment, then finally she smiled. "I'm going to let him dig his own grave." Vin grinned. "Now that's my girl." Maya leaned back in her chair, feeling the familiar thrill of control settle into her bones. Bryce Carter thought he was running the game, but Maya was just getting started. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had seen guys like Bryce before, big talkers full of themselves, always needing an audience to validate their cruelty. They thrived on reactions, on the fear they instilled, on the power they thought they held. But the truth was, guys like Bryce weren't as invincible as they wanted everyone to believe. They made mistakes. And Maya? She was patient. She would let him keep digging his own grave until there was no way out. The next morning, she walked into Clearview High like nothing had happened. The whispers were still there, but they were different. Now. Yesterday, people whispered about the girl who had Vin Diesel pick her up in a muscle car. Today, they whispered about what Bryce had done to her locker. The school was split. Some thought it was hilarious. Others thought Bryce was embarrassing himself. And Maya could feel the balance shifting. The moment people started questioning. The king's authority, his reign became weaker. Bryce was leaning against the lockers as usual, surrounded by his group of jocks. They were laughing about something, probably another one of their cruel jokes. But when Maya walked by, the conversation faltered. Bryce's eyes flicked toward her, waiting for a reaction, some kind of acknowledgement that she was still bothered by what happened yesterday. But she didn't give him one. She walked right past without even pausing. That alone made his expression tighten. By lunchtime, she could feel the tension building. Bryce wasn't used to being ignored. He thrived on control, and Maya wasn't playing by his rules. He needed to do something bigger, something public. So she wasn't surprised when she walked into the cafeteria and saw him at his usual table, a smirk stretched across his face as he called out loudly, "Hey, Maya, you still crying about your little locker?" The cafeteria quieted slightly, students glancing between them. Maya didn't flinch. She grabbed her tray and walked past him to her usual seat. But Bryce wasn't finished. "Guess you can't handle it, huh? Maybe your big bad daddy should come fight your battles for you." That got more attention. Some chuckles, some uneasy glances. Maya finally looked at him. "It's funny," she said, her voice calm. "You keep bringing up my dad, like you're not the one who almost pissed himself when he saw him." The cafeteria went dead silent. Bryce's face darkened. His friends shifted awkwardly, unsure if they should laugh or pretend they hadn't heard it. Maya took a slow bite of her food, her eyes never leaving Bryce's. She wanted him to sit with that feeling, that embarrassment, that vulnerability, because guys like him didn't know how to handle being made into the joke. Bryce clenched his jaw, forcing a laugh, though it was tight and strained. "You think you're tough, huh? Walking around like you own the place just because some rich, famous daddy picked you up in a fancy car?" His voice carried loud enough for everyone to hear. "What? You think you're better than us?" Maya tilted her head slightly. "No," she said simply. "I just don't need to prove anything." And that was the difference. Bryce spent his entire life proving he was the toughest, the strongest, the most untouchable. Maya didn't need to prove anything because she already knew who she was. And that, more than anything, made him furious. That's when she saw it, the moment Bryce made his decision, the way his muscles tensed, the way his hand curled into a fist before he quickly forced it to relax. He wasn't done. He was going to try something worse. And Maya was ready. After school, she kept her pace slow as she walked toward the parking lot. She knew Bryce would be waiting. Sure enough, there he was, leaning against his car, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. His friends weren't with him this time. This was just between them. Maya stopped a few feet away, raising an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Another brilliant speech about how I don't belong here?" Bryce exhaled sharply through his nose. "Nah," he said. "I just want to know one thing." Maya folded her arms. "And what's that?" Bryce studied her for a long moment before finally asking, "Why don't you fight back?" His voice wasn't mocking this time. It wasn't cocky or cruel. It was something else. Genuine curiosity. Maya considered the question for a second, then shrugged. "Because I don't need to," Bryce scoffed, shaking his head. "That's not how it works, Williams. People like me push, And people like you either push back or get run over. Maya stepped closer, lowering her voice. Or maybe people like me wait. We let people like you keep pushing, keep making mistakes, keep proving to everyone how weak you really are. And then, when you're standing in the middle of the mess you created, we don't have to do anything. You've already destroyed yourself? Bryce stared at her, and for the first time, Maya saw something flicker across his face. Doubt. But he covered it quickly with a forced smirk. You think you've got me figured out? You don't know a damn thing about me. Maya studied him carefully. Maybe not, but I know you're scared. Bryce's entire body went rigid. I'm not scared of you. Maya smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Not of me. You're scared of being irrelevant, of losing, of waking up one day, and realizing no one cares about you unless you're making someone else feel small. That's what really terrifies you, Bryce. His jaw clenched, nostrils flaring. Maya could see the war raging inside his head, the need to lash out, to take control back. But there was nothing he could say, nothing he could do, because deep down he knew she was right. Maya shook her head. I don't need to fight you, Bryce. You're already fighting yourself. She turned and walked away, and for the first time since they'd met, Bryce didn't have a comeback. That night, Maya sat at the kitchen table, swirling the ice in her drink. Vin Diesel leaned against the counter, watching her closely. Something happened today, she said finally. With Bryce? Vin asked, raising an eyebrow. Maya nodded. I think I got in his head. Vin smirked. Good, Maya exhaled. But that doesn't mean he's done. Vin studied her for a moment before walking over and sitting across from her. Do you want it to be done? Maya frowned. What do you mean? You could end this right now, Vin said, leaning forward slightly. Call him out. Embarrass him in front of the entire school. You've got more power than you think, kid. Maya was quiet for a long moment, then finally shook her head. No. I want him to end it himself. Vin grinned. Smart. Maya stretched her arms above her head, smirking. Yeah. But it's going to take patience, Vin chuckled. Good thing you've got plenty of that. She smiled faintly. Yeah, I do. And she knew. It was only a matter of time before Bryce Carter destroyed himself. The unraveling started quickly. Bryce had pushed and pushed, waiting for Maya to break, but instead, he was the one falling apart. She saw it in the way his eyes darted whenever she entered a room, in how tense he became when someone mentioned her name, in how his friends no longer laughed as easily at his jokes. The final blow came 2 days later. The school was buzzing before Maya even arrived. As soon as she stepped through the front doors, she caught the hushed whispers, the stifled laughter, the way students huddled together, sneaking glances toward the lockers. Something had happened, and she had a good idea what it was. Making her way through the crowd gathered near Bryce's locker, she saw students snapping photos, murmuring in disbelief. And there, plastered all over the metal door, was a collage of printed screenshots, messages, comments, direct conversations. Every cruel, vile, degrading thing Bryce had ever said about people behind their backs. Some were about classmates, people he pretended to be friends with, only to mock them in private. Others were worse. Racist remarks, sexist comments, things that couldn't be laughed off as jokes. And the worst part? The timestamps. These weren't from years ago. They were recent. Bryce shoved his way through the crowd, his face pale as he saw the locker. His eyes widened. What the hell is this? His voice cracked as he tore the papers down, his hands trembling. But it was too late. The damage was done. Maya didn't need to say a word. She simply leaned against the opposite locker, arms crossed, watching as his kingdom collapsed. Watching the same people who once laughed at his jokes now stare at him with disgust. Watching his friends slowly step away, unwilling to go down with him. Finally, Bryce's eyes locked onto hers. There was no smirk this time. No arrogance, no bravado. Just raw, unfiltered rage. "You did this," he hissed, his voice low and shaking. Maya tilted her head. "Did I?" His nostrils flared. "You think you're so smart, huh? You think this makes you better than me?" Maya stepped closer, her voice calm but steady. "No, Bryce. I think this makes you exactly who you are. The only difference is, now everyone else sees it too." His fists clenched, his body shaking with fury. For a moment, she thought he might swing at her right there in the hallway. But he didn't. He couldn't. Because if he did, it would only prove her right. Instead, he stormed off, shoving through the crowd as they parted around him. But Maya knew, no matter how far he ran, he couldn't escape this. His reign was over. That afternoon, as she walked out of school, she saw Vin Diesel leaning casually against his Charger, waiting. His usual calm expression never wavered, but there was something else in his eyes. Something proud. Maya slid into the passenger seat, exhaling slowly. Vin didn't start the engine right away. He just looked at her. "It's done, huh?" Maya nodded. "It's done." Vin studied her for a moment, then smirked. "You didn't even have to throw a punch." Maya smiled, leaning her head back against the seat. "Didn't need to." He chuckled, finally turning the key in the ignition. The Charger rumbled to life as they pulled away from the school. So what now? Maya thought about it. About the past few weeks. Everything that had led to this moment. And how much had changed. Not just with Bryce, but with herself. She turned to Vin, a small grin tugging at her lips. "Now, I finally get to enjoy high school." Vin laughed, shaking his head. "That's my girl." And as they sped down the road, the weight that had pressed on Maya's chest for so long finally lifted. She had won, not by being louder or stronger or more ruthless, but by being smarter, by being patient, by letting the truth do all the work for her. As for Bryce Carter, he was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a reminder that power built on fear never lasts, and that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should fear the most.